part of the IOM Radio Network.
This is fake. Harta de parte de Jorge. Harta de parte de Jorge.
IPMNation.com.
Tonight on Unleashed, mutiny in the Democratic Party against the president. This time, it's not over free trade, but something else. We'll talk about that. Maine Governor Paul LePage says something racist, kind of. And the latest in the Oregon story with the militants. And I'll also explain why I might have to add Megyn Kelly to my very short list of people at Fox News who I think actually, care about journalism. I'll explain that. It is Thursday, January 7th, 2016, just after 11 p.m. in the Eastern Time Zone, and Matt Connarton Unleashed starts right now.
Auto sequence starts. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Matt Connarton Unleashed. It's that time again, Thursday night, a little bit after 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We are live on IPM Nation 1, as we are 5 nights a week at 11 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, every Tuesday and Thursday night, we have the honor and privilege of also being on OTR FM, the premium channel, on OMTimes Radio. Still the only mostly political show on OMTimes, as far as I know. And so it's been an interesting couple of days. Yesterday, on one of the other political programs that I do, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades, I am the co-host of the Honorable Gary S. Hopper, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern on IPM Nation. You can watch it or listen. And it's up. This week's show is up on YouTube and Vimeo. We put them on both our YouTube and Vimeo channels on IPM Nation. Actually, if you go to IPMNation.com, or you might be there already, you can click either the YouTube or the Vimeo link in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and it'll take you to everything that we've uploaded. But don't do it right now. Listen to this first. But anyway, so it was a big show this week. Gary and I talked to former U.S. Senator Bob Smith from New Hampshire. Someone Gary has supported quite vehemently in the past. So very, very tall man. Dude's the guy's a giant. We had him on the show once before, and I didn't realize how tall he was until I met him, but very large man. But so we had former Senator Bob Smith, former House Speaker in the New Hampshire legislature, though he's still in the legislature, Bill O'Brien, and or William O'Brien. And joining us about halfway through the show, Heidi Cruz, who is the wife of Ted Cruz, who, of course, is running for president. And I guess Senator Cruz was off somewhere else in another part of the country, probably in Iowa. I forget. I think she said where he was, but she's handling things here in New Hampshire as far as media and so forth. I know we have listeners across the country and even some in Canada. So for those who don't know, we broadcast this program from the Uptown Auto Repair Studio, and we are in Manchester, New Hampshire. And, of course, being in New Hampshire, we have the first in the nation primary. So we have a really good level of access to these folks. So it was an interesting show. So we had all three of them on. So I'd encourage you to watch it. It was, to a large extent, a Ted Cruz love fest. I don't think Gary's really chosen a candidate, but both Bill O'Brien and Senator Bob Smith seem to be very enthusiastic about Ted Cruz. I, of course, as usual, I was the fly in the ointment. We were instructed not to ask Mrs. Cruz any policy questions and kind of, just keep it friendly and whatnot. So, I didn't go on the attack or anything like that. But in the conversation leading up to her coming onto the show, I did have to keep kind of adding some perspective here because Gary didn't really do this, but Senator Smith and Representative O'Brien kept doing this thing where they would. It was all everything foreign policy wise is this was the pattern. It's all Obama, and before Obama, Bill Clinton. The combined presidencies of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton have just completely wrecked our foreign policy. And it's just a disaster because of those two administrations. And I, more than once, I had to butt in and say, well, there was a guy named George W. Bush there for 8 years in between. Pretty convenient that he just keeps, getting left out. Now, I understand why they were doing that. It's just a typical partisan hackery. Not to be in any way disrespectful to these gentlemen. Senator Smith seems like a very nice man. And Bill O'Brien, he's actually been on the show a bunch of times over the years, and I like him as well. And I love Gary, but this kind of stuff, it's one of the reasons why, it's been about 10 years now since I first decided that I could no longer be a member of a political party. And, it just reminds me, this kind of stuff just reminds me of why I don't want to join a party. At this point, I'm more libertarian than anything else, but I don't even want to join the Libertarian Party. Because when you're a member of a party, it's like, and this is probably far less true in the official Libertarian Party than it is in either of the two major parties. But when you're a member of one of the two major parties, there's this thing. You're supposed to walk around all day with this idea in your head that, our side, we're the good guys, and, we're competent, and we're smart, and we're wise, and we always do everything correctly. Nothing can ever go wrong when we're in control. It's those other guys on the other side of the aisle constantly screwing everything up and ruining America. And, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat who thinks that way, I'm sorry, but it's just crap. I can't force myself to believe, to be a part of a party and then believe that, my side's always right and the other side's always wrong, and they secretly hate America and want America to fail, and my side's the side that really loves America. And, it's just, but it was just such a perfect example of that kind of thinking. Everything is the fault of Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Just both of them. Both, like I said, Gary didn't really do it, but both Bob Smith and Bill O'Brien, they're both were like, yeah, it's all Obama and Clinton. And it's like, yeah, there was a guy named W kind of in between there. And, they didn't want to hear it, of course. And I was thinking about it today. And what's kind of funny about that is, on the one hand, I get they're playing, they're doing the typical partisan hackery that is required of these gentlemen in order to be the good Republicans that they tell each other that they are. But what's kind of funny about it is, we're still in primary season, okay? We haven't even had our first primary yet. So it almost seems like it would be smarter to not just so conveniently forget about President George W. Bush and his 8 years, because if you're Ted Cruz, and like I said, everybody on the show yesterday was all about Ted Cruz, well, except for me. But I tried to be, I tried not to be too, I was outnumbered, obviously, but which I'm used to on that program. But there is another guy in the race named Jeb Bush, and it seems to me, it might be smart until Senator Cruz wins the nomination, which he won't. It's going to be Trump. But let's suppose that. Let's just pretend that Ted Cruz actually had a chance of being the Republican nominee. And he might actually win Iowa. I don't know. But he's not going to win New Hampshire. But it would seem to me, if you are Ted Cruz, one of your arch rivals is Jeb. And wouldn't it not benefit you, if you're Ted Cruz, to not just conveniently forget about Jeb's younger brother and all the damage that he did. Because, you can kind of, whether or not it's fair, and I think it is fair given the way that Jeb keeps trying to defend his brother, even though his brother was a horrendous president. Doesn't it not make sense to kind of allow the stench of his brother's presidency to kind of follow Jeb around? So I don't know that I agree, with the strategy. I mean, aside from I'm just genuinely turned off by blatant, obvious partisan hackery. But putting that aside, I just don't know if I were in charge of Ted Cruz's campaign, I don't know if I would want these surrogates who go out and speak for him and promote him to just so conveniently ignore the horrific presidency that was that of George W. Bush. Because, you can still spin it as you can do all the same spinning they were doing. Oh, Ted Cruz is this amazing guy. He's going to be this great leader. You can still do all of that while not just completely ignoring the existence of his brother, of Jeb's brother. I think maybe they deep down think that too. They just haven't figured out how to do it. I don't know. All right, we'll be right back. More Unleashed coming up. Don't go away.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of the Inspired Parenting radio show, where every week we bring you empowering information from the diverse fields of conscious parenting, education, neuroscience, consciousness, health, and metaphysics to support you in nurturing the best in your children. So if you're interested in understanding what shapes your children's minds, spirits, and hearts, join me every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and prepare to be inspired.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness and action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton, Unleashed. We're live on this Thursday evening on IPM Nation from the Uptown Auto Repair Studio. IPM Nation, of course, the live station powered by Ambit Energy. You can find out more at ambitrabbit.com. And, of course, We are on Thursday nights and Tuesday nights as well. Tuesday and Thursday, we're also on OTR FM. And don't forget, too, we do archive all the shows on IPM Nation, and all the shows that are carried on OTR FM you can find at omtimes.com/IOM. So everything is available on demand after it airs. And, of course, the television edition of Unleashed. This week, I again spoke quite a bit about the what's going on in Oregon, which we'll try to get to tonight. But I want to, Megyn Kelly is impressive at times. Megyn Kelly, host of the Kelly File on Fox News. She got a lot of attention for recently for, her little mini feud there with Donald Trump. But, I've decided, I'm not sure. I haven't made a final decision, but I think I might have to add her to my very short list of people on Fox who I think actually care about real journalism and aren't just, spokespeople for the RNC. So far, there's only 2 names on that list at the moment. One of them is Chris Wallace, who's the host of Fox News Sunday, son of Mike Wallace. Chris Wallace, I've always felt, is a genuine journalist. And the other is Shepard Smith, who's on weekdays. And I haven't actually watched any Fox News in a long time, but those are 2 people who I've always thought were serious people on Fox. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff I have mixed feelings about. Like I have mixed feelings about Bill O'Reilly, for example. And then there's stuff that's just unwatchable, like Fox and Friends, Steve Ducey, and I know it's pronounced Ducey. I'm just, Fox and Friends is just god awful. This was interesting. This showed up on HuffPost Media. It says, watch this anti-gay activist try to explain the Supreme Court to Megyn Kelly. He may have forgotten that he was talking to a lawyer. It says here, things got heated on Fox News, the Kelly File Wednesday, when an anti-gay activist tried mansplaining the law to host Megyn Kelly, who happens to be a former attorney. Actually, here's what we'll do. I'm going to play the audio for you. And we can enjoy this together. Here it is. And I don't hear anything. Let me try that again.
Of Zimmerman Eddles on public relations.
There we go.
Also, Brian Brown, who is president of the National Organization of Marriage. And we begin with Mr. Brown. Brian, thank you for being here. So how can the judge do this in the face of the Supreme Court decision saying gay marriage is legal, period, in all states?
Well, it goes to your understanding of whether you believe that the Supreme Court has the right to dictate to the rest of the country key questions. Abraham Lincoln, when faced with a Supreme Court that issued the infamous Dred Scott decision, said that it did not. The Supreme Court is not our legislature. It is not every branch of government. And when the court issues an opinion, as it did in Obergefell, which goes against all precedent, which goes against all logic, which even Justice Roberts, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas in the dissent said that this is not the Constitution, then it's incumbent upon legislators, other elected officials, state government officials to not just kowtow to the court, or else we don't have a democracy anymore. So
that's the Supreme Court has the final say on what the law is. That was established long ago in Marbury versus Madison. But here's my question to you. This is what Governor Huckabee said would and should happen. This is what he was pushing for, saying, to you, U.S. Supreme Court, you don't get the final say. I don't care about Marbury versus Madison. And he encouraged state officials to do exactly this. How does this unfold? I mean, aren't we going to have chaos now if states are individually allowed to decide which Supreme Court they're going to comply with and which they're not?
Well, I think you're misreading Marbury versus Madison. Again, you're essentially saying that Abraham Lincoln was wrong. Look, we've had horrible Supreme Court decisions that were not constitutional. In Buck v. Bell, we had the Supreme Court say it was okay
you go back
for
to the legislature and you ask them to pass a law.
That's not what happened. In the Fugitive Slave Act, Wisconsin and other states simply did not comply. You do get to a point where if tomorrow the Supreme Court said Congress no longer has the right to enact laws, everyone would look up and say, no, we're not going to obey the Supreme Court. So, of course, in the general course of law, the Supreme Court, when dealing with litigants, makes a decision that's based on precedent. People give it respect. But if the Supreme Court makes a decision that is so outside the bounds of established constitutional law, established precedent, like Dred Scott, like Buck v. Bell, like Obergefell, then there has to be resistance or you don't have democracy anymore.
Interesting take on it. Brian, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I like how she ended that. Interesting take on it. Yeah, I suppose. By the way, if you do want to watch the video of that, Megyn Kelly's eye roll while that guy was talking was pretty epic. So I mentioned during the intro, we'll move on. Democrats criticized White House on deportation raids in a tense meeting. This is also from HuffPost, and I talked about this somewhat yesterday on the show, on the television edition. I continue to be confounded by the Obama administration on this. On the one hand, he tries to do some positive things in terms of reforming immigration in certain ways, which, of course, makes the Republicans furious because he does them by executive order. But, I'm all for it because I think we need some sort of immigration reform, and Congress won't do anything. But then he turns around and does more. The Obama administration has been very, very pro deportation. That's why, I always say that a lot of immigration activists call him the deporter in chief. It's very strange. It's a strange mixed message, and I don't quite understand it. I never have. And, this is for the second time during his presidency. Of course, I mean, he's in his last year now. I don't think he cares. But, there was a certain, there was actually a lot of outrage among Democrats against the president over the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where he seemed to just be all in with the Republicans on that. And even some Republicans weren't crazy about it, or they had questions. But they ended up working together and getting it through, and it was Democrats. It was like Obama and the Republicans against the rest of the Democratic Party. It was very, very unusual. But Democrats are really pissed again at Obama over this. Let me read this quickly because I know we're going to hit another break, but there's not too much to this. White House officials faced frustrated and upset Democrats on Thursday when they went to Capitol Hill to discuss deportation raids on mothers and children. The raids, which have picked up at least 121 individuals, increased tensions between the Obama administration and champions of undocumented immigrants in Congress, who say the actions are inhumane and harmful to highly vulnerable people. That's what they told White House Domestic Policy Advisor Cecilia Munoz and Homeland Security Deputy Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas in a meeting that, according to one Democratic House aide, went quite poorly for the administration. Another aide briefed on the meeting called it tense but not uncivil. Democratic members told officials they were concerned that mothers and children weren't receiving enough due process and should be treated as refugees, according to multiple aides with knowledge of the meeting. The raids are targeting families who came to the U.S. without authorization sometime after May 1, 2014, in a wave of women and children who said they were fleeing violence in Central America. Members also told administration officials that actions were causing fear in the immigrant community as a whole, contradicting earlier efforts to focus deportation efforts on criminals. Representative Zoe Lofgren, Democrat of California, one of the attendees, told Politico after the meeting, quote, "I think we made the concerns clear and we'll see. People are staying home from work out of fear. It needs to be analyzed," unquote. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi attending the meeting, along with Minority Whip Steny Hoyer, a number of members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and other members involved in immigration matters. Pelosi criticized the raids earlier in the day, telling reporters she worried some families would be in danger if deported. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson said earlier this week that the deportations fit the administration's priorities for removal, priorities that many Democrats supported. He said in a statement that 121 people picked up in the raids all received final deportation orders by a judge and qualified as recent arrivals to the U.S., one of the categories considered a priority. He said at the time, as has been reiterated by Immigration and Customs Enforcement and other administration officials, that the individuals in question had no pending appeals or claims for relief and had exhausted legal remedies to stay. An administration official who declined to be identified by name confirmed that other officials briefed members of Congress on enforcement actions, noting that the number of border apprehensions of children and mothers is going up again. The official said, quote, while we recognize the serious underlying conditions that cause some people to flee their home countries, at the same time, we cannot allow our borders to be open to illegal migration. Those who have come here illegally will be sent home after being provided an opportunity to have their cases heard, consistent with our laws and values, unquote. Well, even if you agree with that, what is, look, I this will be probably the third time that I've said this, but, you know, even Michael Savage, far right-wing conservative talk show host, said, look, if you're going to deport people, deport criminals. There's no reason to be rounding up families like this. It's a very strange thing that the administration is doing, and I don't like it. And, you know, I don't think it reflects our values or what we like to pretend are our values as Americans. You know, this is you know, these women and children who have come here to flee some pretty awful situations. And we're just, well, like I always say, you know, and anytime, anybody who knows anything about history should be concerned anytime you see people being rounded up. And that's what they're doing here. They're rounding these people up. We had to take a break. We will be back in about 2 minutes. I want to talk about Governor Paul LePage of Maine, who said something kind of racist, and I'll elaborate on what I mean by that. We'll be right back. More Unleashed coming up. We're live.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
This is Terry Van Horn, and I want to invite you to join me for my weekly radio show, Hailing Light, on OMTimes Radio every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Hailing Light, we want to bring love, light, and blessings into your world. You can find out more about us at www.healinglightonline.com. Blessings.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Welcome back, Matt Connarton Unleashed. We're live on this Thursday evening. Before we get to Paul LePage quickly, because I have been talking a lot about this story, and this will only take a minute, but it's kind of an update. Says here, according to Reuters, Eamon Bundy rejects sheriff's offer to end Oregon's standoff. It says they met at a neutral site, and the sheriff offered to escort the militiamen out of Oregon. Says, let's see, Burns, Oregon. January 7th. The leader of a group of armed protesters occupying the headquarters of a U.S. wildlife refuge in rural southeastern Oregon on Thursday rejected a sheriff's offer of passage out of the state to end the standoff. During a meeting at a neutral site, Harney County Sheriff David Ward offered to escort Eamon Bundy and his group of occupiers out of Oregon, but Bundy declined. Bundy met the sheriff on a roadside after leaving the compound with other occupiers in 2 vehicles. Following the brief meeting, Bundy told reporters that he would consider Ward's position, but the sheriff had not addressed their grievances. Bundy said, quote, "We always consider what people say," unquote. The takeover that began on Saturday at the headquarters at the National Wildlife Refuge, about 30 miles south of the small town of Burns, is the latest incident in the so-called Sagebrush Rebellion, a decades-old conflict over federal control of land and resources in the U.S. West. The move followed a demonstration in support of the 2 local ranchers, Dwight Hammond Jr. and his son Stephen, who were returned to prison earlier this week for setting fires that spread to federal land. A lawyer for Hammond family has said that the occupiers do not speak for the family. Then there's a picture here of the sheriff and Eamon Bundy meeting. Looks friendly. Residents of the area in a series of public meetings over the past few days have expressed a mixture of sympathy for the Hammond family, suspicion of the federal government's motives, and frustration with the occupation. The leaders of the occupiers are Eamon and his brother Ryan Bundy. Their father, Cliven Bundy, along with a band of armed men, stared down federal agents trying to seize his livestock in Nevada in 2014. Many of the other occupiers are also from outside Oregon. At least a dozen other armed men have been visible at the park headquarters, offices, a museum, and outbuildings. They have come and gone freely from the park without interference from authorities, at times making trips into town. The Bundy's group said on Wednesday night that a group of 3 men entered a refuge unexpectedly and engaged in a brief confrontation with the occupiers. Reuters journalists present at the time saw men running with firearms and heard angry shouting, but no shots were fired. The situation was more calm on Thursday when a series of area ranchers visited for chats with the Bundys, who discussed their beliefs on the federal government had overreached its authority, often pausing to read from the U.S. Constitution. Rancher Royce Wilbur told them, quote, "Hopefully some of the ranching families in the community will come and support you guys. That's what I wanted to post on Facebook. Quit bitching on your electronic devices and come down here and see these people because they are not how they are portrayed in the media," unquote. The Bundys say they want the federal government to turn over its land holdings in the area to local authorities and that they will leave after they have accomplished their goal. Federal law enforcement agents and local police have so far kept away from the occupied site, maintaining little visible presence outside the park in a bid to avoid the deadly violence that erupted during conflicts with militants in Idaho and Texas, you remember Waco, in the 1990s. But local officials have repeatedly asked the occupiers to go home, saying that even residents who support their views object to the illegal seizure of federal property. Quote, "In reality, these men had alternative motives to attempt to overthrow the county and federal government in hopes to spark a movement across the United States," unquote, Harney County Sheriff David Ward said in a statement earlier this week. Like I said, I continue to... I almost can't believe I'm saying it, but I do support these guys as long as it doesn't lead to armed conflict. And there's no reason at this moment to think that it will. I know some think it's inevitable. I don't. And so far, so good. But they have a right to protest, and I think they're correct. Look, I don't know much about how it works as far as the U.S. control over that land and all that. Okay, but I still believe that what sparked this with the Hammonds and their, they served their sentences. These 2 ranchers accused of arson, convicted of arson, they served their sentences and then they're sent back to prison because some judge says, no, we think you need to go back after they've already served their initial sentences and paid their debt to society. I think that is absolutely wrong. I think everyone should be outraged over it. And it's too bad that in the media, these guys are just sort of portrayed as these crazy, wannabe militants in cowboy hats with shotguns, when in reality, they have a legitimate gripe. But I've talked about that a lot this week, so we'll move on. I want to talk about Governor Paul LePage. He's the Republican governor of Maine. He's known for being a blowhard and a bit of a buffoon. Says some really incendiary things. Probably gets along really well with Chris Christie. He seems like a kind of a in some ways, kind of just a dumber version of Chris Christie. But so here's the latest thing with Paul LePage. Discussing the heroin epidemic. Here's what he said. Actually, I'll read the article to you. It's from HuffPost. Maine Governor Paul LePage made a racist claim about his state's heroin epidemic on Wednesday, alleging men with nicknames like D-Money are coming from cities to sell heroin and impregnate Maine's white women. During a town hall meeting in Bridgeton, Maine, LePage was asked how he plans to address the state's heroin epidemic. The first step, LePage said, is beefing up enforcement. He said, quote, now the traffickers, these are guys with the name D-Money, Smoothie, Shifty, these types of guys. They come from Connecticut and New York. They come up here, they sell their heroin, and they go back home. Incidentally, half the time they impregnate a young white girl before they leave, which is a real sad thing because then we have another issue that we've got to deal with down the road. We're going to make them very severe penalties, unquote. LePage's office didn't immediately return a request for comment. The governor's office did not provide comment to the Portland Press Herald, which first reported the comments. Now, here's the thing. What was this really a racist thing to say? I get conflicted sometimes because on the one hand, I hate racism and bigotry. I just think it's incredibly stupid. We're all just people, and we need to get past judging or caring about how much skin pigmentation an individual is genetically assigned. On the other hand, in this era of just super extreme political correctness, sometimes racism is seen in things that where it isn't necessarily. I'll give you an example. When the Trayvon Martin happened, and Geraldo Rivera made remarks about, parents shouldn't let their kids go out in wearing hoodies because people see a kid wearing a hoodie and they think thug. Well, all of a sudden there was all this, and I think he ended up apologizing. There was all this outrage. Oh, Geraldo said something racist. He's saying that, black kids wearing hoodies are thugs. He never said black kids. He just said kids wearing hoodies. Or he might have said minorities wearing hoodies. And I stuck up for him on that because there's nothing racist there, because here's the thing. Sometimes white kids wearing hoodies look like thugs. I used to work in a music store where, in a very white area, okay, where we would see a lot of white kids coming in wearing hoodies. And they would come in and they would have their hoods up, kind of covering their faces a bit, even on a hot summer day. And we would see these kids, white kids in hoodies, and think, why are they wearing hoodies and why do they have their hoods up? It's not cold in here. Oh, that's right. They're here to steal from us. They're here to shoplift. That's why they do that, because they're thugs. They're punks. It had nothing to do with race. These were white kids in hoodies. So part of why I don't think it's necessarily correct to attribute racism to Paul LePage's comments here is when he says, we have these guys that come up here with names like D-Money, Smoothie, and Shifty. He's not saying black guys. Look, there is a large contingent of white America that has appropriated a lot of what at one time might have been considered urban black culture. And, when I hear about, there's these guys that come here with names like D-Money, Smoothie, and Shifty, I don't automatically think he's talking about black people. I just think he's talking about scummy drug dealers. And they come in all colors and all nationalities. Now, so I kind of want to defend him on that. I think it's wrong to hear that and say, oh, he's being racist. I I almost think it's racist to assume he's being racist, because obviously if you're hearing what he's saying and assuming he's talking about blacks, I think you might be the one who's a little hyper-focused on race, because I know there's plenty of white people who would fit that description. So I kind of want to defend him. Now, I say kind of, though, because then the next thing he says, he does end up mentioning race when he says, incidentally, half the time they impregnate a young white girl before they leave. Now, why is he... See, when he throws in that, then it does make it sound like he's talking about black guys, because unfortunately, there is, redneck America, there is a hang up about, black guys knocking up white girls, right? So it does seem like he's kind of playing the race card there. But even that, you could almost explain it away as, well, yeah, he's saying white girl because it's Maine. Maine is a very white state. Who else is D-Money, Smoothie, or Shifty going to knock up? But yeah, it's a little weird that he threw that in. He could have just left out white and said, they impregnate a young girl before they leave. He didn't have to say white girl. But he did. So I don't know. But I almost want to cut him a little bit of slack. But then the next sentence makes me say, maybe not so much. But I do think we need to be I do wish we could be a little less, a little tiny bit less PC, so that we're not attributing racism where there isn't always racism. But this one's kind of, and there's plenty of examples of where that goes on. A little gray area on this one. I'm not so sure. All right, we got one more break, and then we'll be back for one more segment. Matt Connarton Unleashed continues. In about 2 minutes, we're live on IPM Nation 1 and OTR FM. Don't go away.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Miriam Knight of New Consciousness Review, inviting you to my new show where I interview the rising stars of the conscious awakening. We'll explore the many faces of consciousness in action and intriguing perspectives on life, the universe, and everything in between. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Rising Stars Show.
Matt Connarton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connarton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connarton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Welcome back, everybody. Matt Connarton Unleashed. We are live on this Thursday evening on IPM Nation 1 and OTR FM. Don't forget the television edition of Unleashed. That is up on both YouTube and Vimeo. You can look on the IPMNation.com YouTube and Vimeo channels. You can look for that and this week's Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. We had a big show. Again, if you're joining us late, and if you haven't seen that show yet, the Honorable Gary S. Hopper and I were joined by former U.S. Senator Bob Smith, current New Hampshire legislator and former New Hampshire House Speaker Bill O'Brien, and the wife of Senator Ted Cruz. Heidi Cruz joined us to talk about the campaign. So it was an interesting conversation. A little frustrating for me at a few moments there, but I got through it. No, I'm sort of kidding. It was fun. It was a good show. Check it out. Let's see. Something that I found out about right before going on that Jen mentioned to me. Vermont's governor gave a speech about legalizing marijuana. And this is up on Washington Post. Christopher Ingram writes this. I'll read this quickly. Legal marijuana is coming to Vermont this year, at least if Governor Peter Shumlin has anything to say about it. Shumlin, Democrat, offered the broad outlines of a legalization plan Thursday during his annual State of the State address. Quote, "The outdated war on drugs has also failed, and there is no greater example than our nation's marijuana laws," unquote. I absolutely agree. Shumlin noted that, although Vermont decriminalized marijuana in 2013, the 80,000 Vermonters who used marijuana last year, more than 1 in 10 residents, still had to purchase their weed through the black market. That's what happens when you with prohibition. You force the market underground. He's right. Shumlin said, quote, "These illegal dealers couldn't care less how young their customers are, or what's in the product they sell, or what illegal drugs you buy from their stash, much less whether they pay taxes on their earnings," unquote. Shumlin outlined 5 key requirements for any legalization regime, saying such a system should have protections in place to keep adolescents from buying, feature taxes modest enough to keep prices low and hence put black market sellers out of business, provide tax revenue to expand addiction prevention programs, strengthen existing DUI laws, and finally ban the sale of edible marijuana products that have proven vexing in Colorado and elsewhere, at least until the state can figure out how to regulate them properly. By the way, for the record, I don't agree with that last point. Just make it legal, and let's not get into this, well, we're going to ban edible this, or we have to figure out how to regulate that. I don't like that, but everything else there is good. The remarks are significant because, as recently as a few days ago, Shumlin said he was still struggling over whether to back legalization. Tom Engel of the pro-legalization group Marijuana Majority said, quote, "It's looking more and more likely that Vermont will be the first state to legalize marijuana through the legislature instead of by a citizen ballot initiative. This signals an important shift in the politics of marijuana," unquote. Indeed, researchers have long argued that updating marijuana laws via the legislature rather than citizen-initiated ballot measures will lead to smarter regulation. Quote, "Ballot initiatives are a terrible way to make policy changes when the technical details matter," unquote, wrote drug policy expert Mark Kleinman in 2014. Kleinman would know better than most. He served as the chief of Washington State's marijuana regulation team after voters there opted for legalization in 2012. He said, quote, "But sometimes initiatives are the only way to go because legislators simply won't do what a majority of voters want," unquote. In Vermont, however, the situation will be different. Lawmakers there have been eyeing legalization for a while. The only real obstacle was House Speaker Shap Smith, who had been skeptical but officially endorsed legalization, at least in theory, late in the summer. In 2015, Vermont lawmakers commissioned a 218-page report on legalization options from the drug policy experts at the Rand Corporation, so they're going into the process perhaps better informed than the average lawmakers would be. Looming quietly in the background of Vermont's legalization discussion is Bernie Sanders. The senator from Vermont and 2016 Democratic presidential candidate has officially called for removing pot from the federal list of controlled substances, essentially ending marijuana prohibition at the federal level. On the campaign trail, he's been the most outspoken advocate for changing drug laws, so having a strong national voice in support of legalization may provide some political cover for Vermont lawmakers working to legalize back home. Shumlin said Thursday, quote, We have a history of tackling difficult issues with respect and care the Vermont way. I believe we have the capacity to take this next step and get marijuana legalization done right, unquote. So good for him. I don't know. I know very little about Governor Shumlin from Vermont, but this is excellent, and it sounds like it's going to happen. And I think it's great. I mean, they had already decriminalized, which is a great first step, but obviously there's still issues with that. Some people, it depends on who you talk to. Some people think that. Well, I guess in some instances it may be true. It depends on what the attitudes are of law enforcement in that particular state. I have heard it said that in Massachusetts, for example, where they decriminalized some time ago, that it's sort of almost a de facto legalization because with decriminalization, the police, and I'm sure this isn't the case all over Massachusetts. This is just anecdotal evidence I'm offering here, just in terms of what I've heard and read. But but my impression is that the police, to a large extent in that state, have just kind of shrugged it off, and they're not even writing a lot of tickets for fines for marijuana possession. Once it became decriminalized, they just said, well, we're not going to worry about it, and which is wise. I mean, obviously they have bigger fish to fry. I mean, we have this terrible heroin epidemic, which is particularly gripping here in the Northeast. So, but perhaps that's not necessarily been the attitude of law enforcement in Vermont, because as the governor there outlined in his speech, it sounds like there are still some issues. So personally, I believe it should just be legal across the board. I am for full legalization. To be honest with you, if I had my way, I think what I would do at this point, in a perfect world where everything is the way I think it should be. No, but I would fully legalize marijuana, and I think I would decriminalize everything else. I know a lot of people shudder at the idea of, you would decriminalize heroin? How could you? Well, because I don't think it being illegal has any effect one way or the other. But in terms of, dealing with the problem, in the macro, but I certainly don't think that it's helpful to take heroin addicts and lock them in prison. Before we wrap up, too, quick thing. I did touch on immigration earlier, but I got a very interesting Facebook message from a listener to the show, or a viewer. I think he was watching the television edition at the time that he wrote this. And I'm not going to reveal his name. He asked that I do this anonymously, but I did ask him if he minded if I read the message on the air. It's regarding, building a wall at the southern border, to keep out those Mexicans. This is what this viewer had to say. Nice to hear you say a wall is dumb. It is more than dumb. It is moronic. What percentage of people get here illegally who want to? 100%. They pay a coyote $5,000 who guarantees entry no matter how many times it takes. And 40% of those here illegally came here legally. What percent of people who wanted to come here illegally would get here if we built a 50-foot high wall with automatic machine guns every 50 feet and a moat? 100%. We have a 95,000-mile border that is crossed by over 1 million people every day. That is equivalent of more than the entire country crossing the border each year. Let that sink in for a while. With $5,000 to bring someone in illegally, you have a lot of options. Put them on a charter flight to Topeka. Put them on a cruise ship to Portland, Maine. And, I wrote back and I said, well said. And I asked him, and it's funny, the fact that you can get here via these coyotes who smuggle people across, that's never even really come up in my argument before, but I think he's right. He makes a very, very good point there. And then he went on to say this. He said, my position is take down the fence, let the forest at the border regrow, take down the checkpoints just like they did in Europe, and put a sign up saying visa required. You may stay up to 2 weeks without one, 180 days for Canadians, but after are subject to removal within 72 hours. No appeals will be heard from within the United States. So I'm not so sure what I think about that part, but, but I mean, he's right to agree with me. Well, obviously, I think he's right to agree with me, but I like what he had to say about the wall. This silly notion that, we'll build a big wall. Trump's going to build a big wall, and he's going to get Mexico to pay for it. And, because I don't know why, because he's Trump, but it's all silliness. And, I've pretty much taken the open borders position at this point, because we're never going to be serious about enforcing our border. There are people who will tell you they are serious about enforcing the border. They will tell you they are so insistent on border security, and when they become president, they'll make sure that it happens. And I always say, a lot of Republicans promise that. We had 8 years of a Republican president with, there's that name again, George W. Bush, and 6 years of that with a Republican-controlled Congress. Where's that wall that you were hoping he would build? It's not there. They're not really serious about it. They talk the talk, but they'll never actually do it. It's a big scam. It will never be solved. It doesn't benefit either the Republican or the Democratic Party to come to some sort of a resolution on illegal immigration, because you can't raise money off of a problem once you've solved it. So better to just keep talking about it, making sure it never gets solved one way or the other, and both parties can continue to raise money on it by telling you that they are somehow going to fix it. And that is why, just one of the many reasons why I will once again vote for the Libertarian nominee in the 2016 election, whoever it may be. I have endorsed Gerald W. Perry, but Gary Johnson is now has entered the race, and if he is the nominee, I will vote for him. Democrats and Republicans at the federal level, certainly when they enter the White House, are not ultimately, if they want to be true to their parties, they can't actually solve anything, because once you solve an issue, whichever party you belong to can no longer raise money off of that issue. That's the scam. And we sure do love to fall for it, don't we? That's it. We're out of time.